A lot of y'all may know this story, but for those who don't, it is the story of when Steve Jobs returned to Apple and how he managed to get a failing company back on the top. He and Steve Wozniak founded Apple, and then a few years later, Steve Jobs wanted to get somebody more experienced to run Apple as the CEO. So he went to the Pepsi's, I think, CEO president, John Sully. And Steve Jobs at that time was 28, 29 years of age. And he went to this big corporate executive and told him, come to Apple. The corporate executive was doing really well at Pepsi and said no. So Steve Jobs asked him that, do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want to come to Apple and change the world? And this is regarded as one of the best business quotes in history. When John Sully came, he took over, and then he and Steve Jobs started having issues, which in turn led to Steve Jobs being fired. So once Steve Jobs was out, Apple started falling for a few years, and then towards the end, all shareholders, the board of directors, they all knew that the only person who could save Apple was Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs had founded a company called Next, as well as funded in Pixar. Apple went and bought Next, it bought Pixar, and they got Steve Jobs back on the Apple board as the CEO. Now he anyway fired these other people, but he did one thing to get the whole company back on track. So he took 100 of his executives. So Steve Jobs had this very famous going to an offsite, going to another, going to a vacation house with his whole team and then brainstorming over there. So like that, he took 100 of his executives. Okay. And when he took them there, he told all of them that I want a common top 10 problems that the company is facing, which if we solve the top 10 problems, the company will start going back up. But he wanted all 100 of these executives to be on the same top 10 points. And he said, you have the day, 12 hours to finish it off. All 100 of them started working frantically, and they finally came up with a list of the top 10. Steve Jobs put the top 10 list on sort of on the board in front of his 100 executives, and he cancelled the bottom 7, and he told them, we will only focus on these top 3. If we can solve these top 3 problems, the whole company will basically revive again. They had to follow him, and if you all know the history, after he came back, Apple started once again coming back to the top, and as we know today, it is the most valuable company in the world. How is this story related to us? Steve Jobs, being one of the most powerful executives in the world who understands how to get things done, understood that focus is about doing the most important things and decluttering your mind from all the other things that overwhelm you. Something as simple as that thought process could turn a failing tech company into the best company in the world. You should be able to take this seriously and apply it. Because we have a lot of students who have a lot of difficult time in focusing when they're studying or when they are starting to work. Sometimes a lot of things happen and you're overwhelmed. Sometimes you don't know what to do first, what to do next. Things keep coming in the middle. And because of that, there is always a lack of focus or a feeling of overwhelm. First step, which we recommend for y'all, is the Steve Jobs method. Make a list of all the things that you believe you have to do. So for example, if you have an exam or you're studying or you have 2 weeks before the exam and you have a lot of things to cover, make a list. Similarly, if you're at work and you've taken on projects, or there is just a lot of things that you get in a day, and it's crushing, you feel crushed under the weight of it, make a list. Have a list of everything and take the top 3, 5 or 7 tops number of things and say that I will make sure that before I take up any other work, or if it's academics, going to any other chapters, getting scared about other things, future papers, XYZ, you put your complete focus on the top 3, top 5 things and make sure that you finish those before you decide the next thing. Step 2. Now, I read which was the book 7 Highly Effective Habits of Successful People. In that, there is this matrix they show where you can chart out what is each task's urgency and importance. So, for example, as you can see, if something is urgent and important, it has to be done immediately. If something is important but not urgent, you have to do it at some point, but you can do it later. And Of course, if it's urgent but not important, you can give it to somebody else to solve it. And if it's neither urgent nor important, you don't need to touch it. This gives you a good perspective as to what to focus on. So that is the second step. Follow the urgent and important as well as not urgent plus important category of placing your tasks and then putting them in the Steve Jobs list. And finally, the third step is have very rigid time frames for yourself. For any big or small task, create a deadline for yourself. Use the technology has reached a point where you can use calendars. There's so many tasks, task-based apps which you can use, which help you stay on track with what you should do. Only focus on completing urgent and important things. Focus on finishing them within a specific time. And if your deadline is approaching, you know that you cannot do anything else till you are done with these few important tasks. Follow them as per the timeline, and that's it. If you combine these 3 steps to almost anything at work or with studies, you will find so much of relief. So just combine these 3 steps for anything that you're doing, either for your studies or at work, and see the difference in the way, in the calm you feel and in your own productivity and efficiency.